Okay, looks like the YouTube live works. I'm going to share that with all our WhatsApp groups. Okay, Mataji, shall we begin?
Yes. Hare Krishna, everyone. Nice to be back with all of you. in our series of classes on Srimad Bhagavatam. We started out with Canto 1, Chapter 1, and today we will be covering Chapter 4. So before we move to this chapter, I want to do a little bit of, a summary of the last chapter that we covered last Saturday. And we've been seeing, like in the last 3 chapters, Sutta Goswami is answering the 6 questions of the sages of Naimisharanya. And this is how Srimad Bhagavatam really begins, is the sages asking these very, very deep and penetrating questions, and which is meant for the benefit of the people in Kali Yuga. So in the last chapter, Sutta Goswami answers the last of the 6 questions, which was regarding the shelter of religion and the shelter of knowledge. The sages had asked, where has religion and knowledge gone after Krishna left this planet? And Sutta Goswami answers this question by saying that when Krishna left the planet, he took with him religion and knowledge and left behind the beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam, his own incarnation. It's like when the sun sets and goes away from our sight, it takes with it the light and the heat and becomes chilly. So in this age of Kali, the people who have been plunged into darkness, not knowing from good to bad, from knowing the difference between what is good and what is bad, or even worse, what is favorable or what is unfavorable, everything pretty much is topsy-turvy. Where does the light come from in this time and age? So Sutta Goswami answers that question by saying that Srimad Bhagavatam, that is arisen in Kali Yuga, as the sun arises in the morning. The sun of the Srimad Bhagavatam arises to give light. Then Sutta Goswami says the final verse of the last chapter, that's verse 44, that I have heard Srimad Bhagavatam from my spiritual master, Sukadeva Goswami, and have realized it, and now I will explain that same work to you, as I have heard from him. I will not change it, I will not interpret it, I will speak directly in parampara. After saying this, Shaunaka Rishi, now Shaunaka Rishi is the head of all the sages, of the thousands of sages who have gathered at Naimisharanya, and he's not an ordinary sage. Anybody who's giving shelter to thousands of sages has to be very, very amazing and special. So he's been chosen on behalf of the sages, and he speaks very excitedly to Sutta Goswami. So I will begin by reciting the first verse here, the Sanskrit, and then the translation. Vyaso vacha iti bhuvanam samstuya muninam dirga shatrinam vidhakula pati sutam bravacha shanako bravid. On hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Shaunaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. So congratulated means he glorified him. He's very, very happy with the answers that Sutta Goswami has given for all the 6 questions. And so now he's congratulating him and he's glorifying him for the purpose of encouraging him. The sages, they want to hear about Krishna. They have no other desire. They know that this is the medicine for this age. And they want to do good for all and have gathered in Naimisharanya for this work. So in text 2, starting, this begins 3 sets of questions. Now 6 questions have already been answered, and another 3 set of questions are going to be asked by the sages. So you can see the whole entire Bhagavatam, there's many, many questions. Later on, Vidura will be asking questions from starting Canto 4 from Maitreya Muni, and Maitreya Muni answers those questions. So initially, of course, Parikshit Maharaj asks questions from Sukadeva Goswami, And now the sages are asking from Sutta Goswami. So these are new set of 3 questions, and they are coming from the fact that Sutta Goswami has already given the introduction in terms of, the ultimate purpose of the ultimate good for all people and the essence of all scriptures. He's already set the scene where now the sages are very curious as to know who is the speaker of the Bhagavatam. They want to know about Srila Vyasadeva, who has realized this knowledge and who spoke the Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Goswami. So now Sukadeva Goswami, he becomes the subject matter of the second set of questions. And then Sukadeva Goswami, he realized that knowledge and he spoke it to Parikshit Maharaj, who becomes the subject matter of the third set of questions. So this is very, very exciting for someone who's such a learned personality as Sutta Goswami to have such relevant questions. So the first question, which is starting from text 3, where the sages are asking that why is it that Srila Vyasadeva, who's such an incredible scholar and who has compiled the entire Vedas, the Puranas, the Itihasas, and who summarized the Vedic knowledge concisely in Vedanta Sutra. So these Vedanta Sutra are codes, which are like formulas where many, many thoughts and philosophies are put into just terse one line. And then he also wrote the 220 verses of the Mahabharata. Now that's a lot of verses because Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses and Bhagavad Gita, which is within the Mahabharata, has 700 verses. So after having written so many, so many verses, why would Vyasadeva write another book of 18,000 verses? And then the second question deals with Sukadeva Goswami. Why did Vyasadeva speak this Srimad Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Goswami, who's a well-known sage, who was fully realized? Now, these questions were asked one after another quite rather quickly, and then Sutta Goswami begins to answer the first question in this chapter, which is elaborated further in the next 2 chapters. And the third question will be answered later on in the first canto. Is pretty much covers the entire first canto, the questions about Parikshit Maharaj. So second question relates to Sukadeva Goswami. So that's as in verses 4 to 8. So their question was that if Sukadeva Goswami was already realized, fully absorbed in Brahman, and had nothing to do with the body, then why did he take the trouble to hear and study Srimad Bhagavatam? He was realized to such an extent that that he was beyond the body. He didn't have to undergo the study of this book. It's like, if someone gets a Nobel Prize in physics, and he decides to go back to college and study under a particular teacher, and especially a particular book. So everybody would want to know what that particular book is, the quality of that book, so that somebody so learned who's already got a Nobel Prize, that would impel him to study this book. So in the same way, Sukadeva Goswami was already self-realized. He was actually fixed in monism, and he was transcendental to material things. It is said that he was so like an avadut. He appeared sometimes like a madman, and he had nothing to do with external things. So in this very chapter, in verse 5, Vyasadeva was following his son Sukadeva Goswami to call him back home. When Sukadeva Goswami was born, after 16 years, he agreed to come out of the womb of his mother. He immediately walked away. And Vyasadeva was very, very distressed. And we read that in the last chapter, how he was so distressed, and he was following Sukadeva Goswami and calling out, "Oh, my son, oh, my son." and nobody would answer except the trees were echoing. So we had read that. And then Sukadeva, as he was following Sukadeva Goswami, they passed an area where young maidens were bathing naked. So when Sukadeva Goswami passed them, they did not care to cover their bodies. But when Vyasadeva passed them, they immediately covered themselves. So Vyasadeva was very, very curious, and he asked them, why? And they explained that actually Sukadeva Goswami was completely innocent, and he did not distinguish between male and female. So whereas Vyasadeva was a householder, and so he had to maintain the difference. So I was thinking that here would be a good point of discussion with the children, just to review their understanding of the difference between the body and soul, and to make that point that how the soul has no gender, really. The soul is not male or female, it's not American or Indian, and some basic things can be covered here, which can become the basis of a very interesting discussion, and very, very revealing and very, something that they can learn from. And you will find some questions also in the higher thinking questions section of this guidebook that Sri Radhika Mataji will cover a little bit later. So another story is that in chapter 19 of this canto, how when Parikshit Maharaj, he leaves home after he was cursed, and he decides to leave his kingdom, leave his family, and he goes to the bank of the Ganges to fast until death, waiting for 7 days. He was waiting, and all the sages had gathered there to be with him during the last hours of last days of his life. And he had asked 2 questions. These 2 questions were, what is the duty of everyone in all circumstances? And what is the duty of someone who's about to die? Now, during the sages, there were many, many sages, and these sages had come from all over the planet, from different universes, in fact. So they were very, very exalted sages, and nobody could actually answer that question with authority. In other words, everybody had a different answer. At that time, Sukadeva Goswami walked in, and everybody knew that he was authority, and he was actually the person to answer these questions. And so they all stood up. And here I was thinking that the discussion, so this is mentioned in this chapter in one of the verses. So a discussion question could be, to bring other stories in the Bhagavatam where, there were some other avadhutas or renounced people who are completely out of their body. Now, the children, somebody asked me a question last time that, well, if the kids haven't read these stories, how do you ask them? Well, I was thinking it becomes also very interesting that we bring these stories during that time. We don't have to read the entire section of the Bhagavatam for that, but just to make a point, just to make it interesting, or we can even tell them the story of, because the children at that point, they learn the art of comparison. They learn or to find similar things in the Bhagavatam, which also makes that point. And it becomes like a storytelling, and it becomes very, very interesting, how we all like stories, especially children. So we can find examples like that. And even if they don't know these examples, we can bring it to them. Or, for example, the story of Avadhut's story in 11th canto, chapter 7, where the son of Yayati, Yadu, he meets this Avadhuta, and he questions him that how is it that he's not doing anything of this material world yet, and he's not earning to get a living or working hard or maintaining his family, but yet he looks so happy and so carefree. What is it that makes him so carefree and happy? And at that time, the Avadhuta, he answers by giving the example of how he has 24 gurus from whom he has learned life lessons. And this section of the Bhagavatam is really especially very good for the children, because they learn, they learn how to see, how to understand analogies and comparisons, so many wonderful things. For example, the earth is their guru, earth and sky and wind, all these are gurus. So in this way, we learn the story of the Aruddha, who's very much similar, where he's completely carefree and but very, very self-realized. So another example I was thinking would be Nityanand, Lord Nityanand, who was also an Avadhuta who acted in very transcendently mad ways. He was playing with crocodiles in the water. So we can bring stories like that. His childhood leelas, where he was, was actually, while he would play with his friends, these leelas, he would actually be enacting in real these pastimes, and everybody would be so amazed. So in this way, the story becomes alive and the section becomes interesting. And the point goes across that who Sukadeva Goswami was, because Sukadeva Goswami, in a similar way, because he was going naked, all the children were following him and they would tease him. So like that, they would think that he's mad. So so the question was that why would he want to study the Bhagavatam when he's already so self-realized? And also the last part of this second question about Sukadeva Goswami was how Parikshit Maharaj, how he associated with Parikshit Maharaj for 7 days and nights, even though he was in the renounced order of life. Generally, in the Vedic culture, the renounced people don't mix with householders. So the story is that Sukadeva Goswami would go to a householder's house for just about the time it takes to milk a cow. And then, of course, he would beg for some milk and move on. And that would take like 5, 10, maybe maximum 20 minutes. And during that time, he would give higher knowledge. Right? So how is it when a renounced person such as himself, who has no business with householders, how did he spend 7 days and nights with Parikshit Maharaj? What was the reason? How wonderful this king must be that he actually decided to spend time, So in the same way, I was thinking a story that corresponds to this is Lord Chaitanya meeting with Pratap Aruddha, how eventually, Lord Chaitanya didn't want to meet him, but eventually he did. So, so in this way, we can, like I mentioned in my first class, how the parents or the teachers, they are actually studying these stories with the purports, making note of the points where they would like to discuss. And this way they're familiar with what's going on, what Prabhupada is saying in the purports. So the children are not reading the purports, but the teachers and parents are very familiar with these points. And and not every purport needs to be discussed, just some purports that we feel would be very interesting for the children. So some philosophical points which we may think is very, very deep and it's too deep for the children, you'll be surprised how wonderfully they take. The point is that it may go over their head a little bit, but they have taken some of it, so that when that same point comes later on in some other section of the Bhagavatam, it's gone halfway deep, and then it goes further deep like that. So Prabhupada in this purport, he also talks about the householders' duties, that they need to, how they should receive renounced people, that they are coming, and if they are asking, they are not asking for their own benefit, not for themselves. And then he talks about the duties of a renounced person. So it's very interesting, and this way the children learn how to respect sadhus and devotees, and it's not just artificial, but it comes very, very deep, because they remember the story of Sukadeva Goswami and how, and Prabhupada's, points in the purport. So now the third question. So we can see how deep these questions are, how penetrating these questions are. And naturally, the answer also becomes very deep as we read on, as we move on to other chapters. We'll hear how deep these answers are, right? It's just like, if we were to throw a huge boulder into the river, there's a huge splash, right? But if you throw a small stone into the river, there's not such a big splash. So these questions are very, very deep. So it requires very, very deep answers. So the third question. So the second question was about Sukadeva Goswami. And the last question is about Parikshit Maharaj. So So these questions, there's three set of questions, and these will be answered in subsequent chapters in the first canto. The first question was that what caused the great king to give up everything? So within this, they asked the first question, which is what they asked the birth and activities of Parikshit Maharaj. So as we know, Parikshit Maharaj's birth was not ordinary, right? And this is described in the 12th chapter of the first canto, which we still haven't covered. And his activities are described in the 16th and 17th chapter of this first canto. And in the 18th and 19th chapter will describe that how he gave up everything and went to the bank of the Ganges to prepare for death. So the final question about Parikshit Maharaj was, how is it possible that such a great king, who's the protector of all citizens, how could he give up everything to hear Srimad Bhagavatam and accept the curse? In other words, he had a responsibility. So many citizens were depending on him. Why did he not reverse the curse? Why did he have to give up his responsibility? And especially when he was such a loved king. So regarding his birth, we know about Parikshit Maharaj seeing the Lord within the womb and how Krishna gave him darshan. And this is not an ordinary birth. I mean, who would get darshan within the womb? So he is very special. And his life and activities were especially exemplary. And he's glorified for being an ideal king. He chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. Now, in the purport of this verse, which is verse 12, Prabhupada discusses very important points here about the slaughter, how King Parikshit would not allow slaughter houses or killing of cows. In other words, Prabhupada says how he was not a foolish or a partial administrator, that he would arrange for the protection of all the humans, but allow the poor animals to be killed. Why? Because he wanted to please the Lord. The Lord is pleased when every one of his children are taken care of, right? So I was thinking that here a good discussion would be to compare Parikshit Maharaj's rule with today's society, how cow slaughter is just the norm, And for a deeper question for older kids would be, was it okay for the king to punish those who kill cows? Wouldn't it infringe on the freedom of choice? Like, how would you even do that in today's society, in today's world? So many people are eating meat, and if how would the king or the leader or the government do? Punish those and make this rule in the first place. So then that leads to some deep discussion about the responsibilities of a leader, and the Shastric injunction, how cow and animal killing for the purpose of eating encourages sinful tendencies and is highly karmic and can lead to many, many natural disasters in the world, like we see today. Right now, we are all in this pandemic situation today, and we know that a lot of it has to do with meat eating. So it becomes a very relevant discussion, how animal killing is very sinful and it should not be done. And we can give you other examples from the scriptures as well. The story of Hiranyakashipu, how he did that, but in the end, he was destroyed. So in other words, we have Hiranyakashipu, but we have also Prahlad, who's such a great devotee of the Lord. So in this way, we can make it very alive for our children. And his death was, of course, very wonderful because Prabhupada says how he got notice of his death. Somebody who knows ahead of time when he's going to die is actually very fortunate because he can prepare for his death. So, and of course, he was a great personality because he just simply heard Bhagavatam and he did not eat or drink during those days. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about how Sutta Goswami is going to answer these questions. And he begins, and this becomes a great storytelling, for our children. He's going to initially begin with answering the first question, why Vyasadeva found it necessary to write Srimad Bhagavatam, and So the story begins that how Vyasadeva, how he was sitting on the banks of the Saraswati River in a very, and in a transcendental vision, he saw that Kali Yuga was coming. Now, the story summary in the guidebook will really bring this to life. So, which becomes like it's written in like a story where the children find it very, very interesting, right? But even during the time that you're reading the translations with the children, you can make it very alive and wonderful, and imagine, Vyasadeva sitting in a cave in the Badrika ashram, and there's a beautiful Saraswati river flowing next to him. And he's meditating, and in his vision, he sees that Kali Yuga was coming. And this yuga has all the symptoms of unhappiness. And in many, many sections of the Bhagavatam, throughout the Bhagavatam, we hear about Kali Yuga and the different symptoms of Kali Yuga, where most of all, the mind is very, very disturbed. The mind is full of material desires, and the more people try to satisfy the desires, the more they become disturbed. So in his meditation, he sees this deterioration, how people in general will be faithless, will have no faith pretty much in anything. How there's no faith right now in the, in the economy or the currency, because people don't know when the economic crash is going to happen, right? Then there may be, people are losing faith in their own parents because of abortion, a child doesn't know when he's going to be killed, right? Then there's no faith in the government leaders, because they're all, very, very sinful, and deceitful. And so in this way, parents, it's hard. So people become faithless because of things, what's going on today. And most of all, he talks about reduction in duration of life, because of irregular habits. People have short lives because of irregular habits. And of course, the fruits and vegetables are also not as wholesome anymore, because with time, when Kali Yuga progresses, the time also saps the energy of the yugas, where things become very, very less, healthy, and people are not feeling, happy and healthy. So in this way, they suffer because due to lack of good nutrition. Then, of course, there's impatience. People are prone to anger. Why? Because of lack of goodness. People are too passionate, and where they don't have any patience. And so in this way, Vyasadeva, he wants to help. And he's thinking, how can I help? How can I help? So, and this is the nature of a great soul. When he sees the suffering of others, he wants to help. So now the remainder of the 4th chapter is dedicated to what Vyasadeva did when he saw the horrors of Kali Yuga approaching. And that's, he took the Shastras. He took the Shastras and that guide humanity, and he, because Shastras is the book. These are holy books that sadhus and pure devotees, they like to take shelter of, because it's authority. Like these are law books of authority of this society for all of us. So so the purpose of the Vedas. So he took this Vedas and he divided the Vedas into 4. Now, what are the Vedas? So these Vedas are books of knowledge, and in many scriptures and in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains how the real purpose of the Vedas is to please and serve and please God. But what's happening is that people misunderstand the Vedas, thinking it is meant simply for satisfying the senses through the process of rituals and sacrifices. Now, there is a very big part of the Vedas called the Karma Khandya section, which most people consider as the end all of all the Vedas. They think that I should engage in these rituals and sacrifices in order to get better material facilities and go to the higher planetary systems where facilities of enjoyment is greater. And in this way, they forget the main purpose of life. So in other words, they get sidetracked. So there was nothing wrong in the Vedas, except people haven't understood it properly. And the way one can understand, and through these verses, Prabhupada makes such a strong point here, that the way to understand the Vedas, one cannot understand the Vedas except through discipline and disciplic succession. So discipline comes by becoming a disciple. Disciple means discipline, which means by taking shelter of Guru and being linked in this parampara, disciplic succession, one can actually understand the Vedas. Otherwise, it is not possible. Today we see in India how there are so many different people who profess to have studied the Vedas. They have last names like Trivedi, Dwivedi, right? Chaturvedi. They're meant to have, these names signify that they have read so many parts of the Vedas, maybe 2 sections of the Vedas. I mean, the Vedas are so vast that one person cannot be master of the Vedas. It takes like 12 years to study just one section of the Vedas. But yet their own life is very, very disappointing, because they're eating meat and doing all kinds of sinful things. So people get sidetracked into this karma kandya section, and this way the purpose of the Vedas is lost. Right? So Vyasadeva wrote this Vedas. It was originally one Veda. But understanding that people in this time and age, they will not be able to understand the Vedas, he divided into 4. So so in this way, so I was thinking that, I was remembering a story actually, a story that Prabhupada gave one time. He was in India and he was attending this conference of people who were great scholars of these Vedas, different types of Vedas in India, and so they had gathered to talk to him and to hear him and question him. And so Prabhupada asked them that, what do you think is the essence of all the Vedas that you've read? And every one of them said that, well, there's so many different purposes of the Vedas. There's so many different essences of the Vedas, because the Vedas talk about, so many different things, how one can go to the higher planetary system, how one can get a good, material facilities. Veda means knowledge. It means it covers every type of knowledge. So they said the essence is very difficult to come to the essence of the Vedas. So there were Gurukula children sitting next to him. And so he asked one of the children that, what do you think is the essence of the Vedas? And he said, Krishna is to know and love Krishna. So Prabhupada pointed out that even a small child who is a devotee of the Lord can understand the purpose behind the Vedas. So in this way, Vyasadeva, it's not like he wrote the Vedas are defective. It's people have missed the point of the purpose of the Vedas. I was thinking that it's a nice thing to tell the children all these things, because they're going to hear a lot about this, and they should know the distinction between, the Vedas, the karma kandya, versus the, devotional part of the Vedas, which also is the Mahabharata, where we have the jewel of India, of spiritual wisdom, and which is the Bhagavad Gita. So actually, Vyasadeva points out that Mahabharata is actually higher than all the 4 Vedas, the 4 Vedas, because it talks due to the jewel of spiritual wisdom, Bhagavad Gita being in that. But because people don't like philosophy, and it's hard for them to understand philosophy in Kali Yuga, he gave that in the form of stories, in the story of Mahabharata. So in the last slide, Vyasadeva is feeling compassion for the suffering souls of Kali Yuga. He's after dividing the Veda into various parts, he also wrote many other scriptures, and he wrote, like I said, 220 verses of the Mahabharata. He wrote the entire summary of the Vedas as Vedanta Sutra, and itihasas, many stories, and these are called the 5th Veda. The Mahabharata is actually called the 5th Veda. And why people like the Mahabharata is because it's exciting. There's so much killing, suspense, political intrigue. So, but yet, even after that, Vedavyas is feeling very, very dissatisfied. Why? Because he kind of guesses himself in one of the verses is that the amount of direct glorification of Krishna in the Mahabharata is very small. So, in other words, even though Mahabharata does mention Krishna and the Pandavas, but the amount of direct glorification of Krishna is small compared to Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, it cannot satisfy the soul. So all that is going to be the subject matter for the next two chapters, chapters 5 and 6. And so we will not go in detail into that chapter right now. So in text 31 of this chapter, actually Vyasadeva pretty much answers his question as to why he's feeling dissatisfied, thinking that it could be because he's not described Bhagavad Dharma, which is dharma that is meant for Krishna's satisfaction. So I will stop here and conclude with the overview of this chapter, and then give over to Shri Radhika Mataji to elaborate on some of the activities for this chapter in the guidebook. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mataji. I'm just going to take a few seconds to share my screen. Okay, nice to be back with everyone, chugging along. Chapter 4. So after we have read the chapter, Mataji, would you mind muting yourself?
Oh, me? Okay.
Yeah, we can try that. So after we have hopefully read the purpose in advance of our discussion with our children, and then we have discussed the translations with our children or child, then we are ready to move on to a comprehensive guide for young readers. But before I show you chapter 4 activities, I was feeling very encouraged by something that a mother has shared with us related to these sessions that are being conducted, and I thought would share with you. So there is Mother Sapna who lives in the United Kingdom and has 2 beautiful children, Shyam, who's 13, and Sia, who is 7, right here. And they've had the guidebook, the comprehensive guide for young readers, for some time. But by watching or attending these sessions, they were inspired to actually open them and get started with the activities. And then they shared these amazing pictures from the activities that they've been doing. So I wanted to share that with you. So this is an activity from chapter 1, a boat with a suitable captain to cross the ocean of material existence, which is of the Bhagavatam boat activity given. And you can see how beautifully Sia has done artwork to illustrate this activity. She shows the boat and then has the captain of the ship, Sutta Goswami. She even has, what happens when the captain is not good. And then this is also an activity from chapter 1, where the child is being helped in their understanding that when you pour water on the roots, automatically satisfies all the parts of the tree. Similarly, when you satisfy Krishna, then everybody is satisfied. This one is the symptoms of Kali Yuga from chapter 1 again. So the book encourages children to draw it, and here they've made puppets. I like these. Mr. Lazy, I can't be asked. Mr. Disturbed, I don't know what to do. Leave me alone. There's Mr. Misguided. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? Mr. Unlucky, why me? Why does this always happen to me? So they made these nice fun puppets to understand what, people of Kali Yuga, all of us are like. And then this activity is from chapter 2. You can see she's making her puppets, and look at how beautiful this Naimisharanya puppet theater is. And this activity is in the guidebook in chapter 2, where Sutta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya are depicted in the forest. She's made some nice yagya with matchsticks, and she's got fruits even. So I wanted to thank Shyam and Sia for their artwork and for encouraging us in our work, and wanted to encourage parents, if you're using these books, share with us how it's going for you. All right, so we get started with chapter 4, the appearance of Sri Narada. And as Mataji mentioned, the story summaries are written in a way that children can really relate with them. The sages who had gathered in Naimisharanya had many questions to ask Sutta Goswami. Shaunaka Rishi, the leader of the assembled sages, asked, "Oh, Sutta Goswami, please tell us all about the Srimad Bhagavatam." So it's given in a very child-friendly, conversation style, taking some artistic or literary license. I'm trying to click on this Vrinda and Lali. I'm sorry. I was having difficulty clicking on that because I have this. There's this little bar that shows in Zoom, and so that bar is showing, and I'm not able to click on the link itself. But I'll show you. If you go to SoundCloud, and you can look for Vrinda Kishori Devi Dasi, who also helps to write the story summaries. And you will be able to find her Srimad Bhagavatam 1.4. And it's just really beautifully done.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Then why did people think he was crazy?
Because he had no clothes on.
He never wore any clothes. No. Oh my gosh, that must have been so funny. Oh my gosh, did people laugh? They laughed.
And they went ha ha ha, and they followed him.
Oh no, that mustn't have been nice. Oh, poor Sukadeva Goswami. Did everyone in the whole wide world do that? Huh?
No.
No? Oh, then?
It was that. Only.
So perhaps you can look for these, and she also has recordings on YouTube, which really brings the story summary to life. So here are kids from Sunday school. We're working on chapter 4 from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's enough to engage everyone of all ages. I particularly like this activity. Character descriptions. So 2 main characters here, and I kind of go around the room and ask everyone to share, what do you know about Narada Muni? What do you know about Narada Muni? And they add facts, and then anything we're missing, we go back to the book and we read up. Nice key messages, grouping verses so that it's very easily organized and you can follow the sequence of activities. Understanding the story. So I wanted to share, because a lot of people are teaching on Zoom lately or on other virtual meeting platforms. And the way I did understanding the story this past week was I did breakout sessions, because I have 4 students, 2 of which are mine, and then 2 other students. And it was really fun. As long as you use technology, kids get excited about anything. So we just split into 2 breakout rooms, and each breakout room had 2 students. And they had to come up with the answers to these multiple choice questions. And they really had a good time. And then we came back to the main session. So we've been using a lot of technology features lately, thanks or no thanks to COVID. But I want to share that a lot of most of these activities are doable, even on a virtual platform, if that is what you're doing right now. Higher thinking questions. I really like these. I normally go through these as I am preparing to teach my children, reading the purpose, and then I write down the relevant question next to the verse, so that when I'm on that verse, I remember to ask them that question. So like when I was on verse 12, I wrote down this question in my Bhagavatam itself. So explain and expand upon the sentence. Can you think of any relevant examples of devotees who faithfully follow this example? So this really gives me good ideas how to encourage discussion. So again, like I was sharing last time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur took deep philosophy and converted it into village songs and folk songs. And the book takes deep philosophy of our Srimad Bhagavatam and converts it into fun poems, which the children love, and they are able to understand the philosophy behind the chapter. So this is a really fun activity, Vyasadev's jump rope, and has a great poem that goes through the whole story of the chapter. Vyasadeva is very kind. People of Kali Yuga are so blind. Vyasadeva is feeling sad because Kali Yuga is so bad. He can foresee suffering because the sage is declining. So I wanted to show you. Okay, no. Why is there no sound? 1 second. Technology doesn't always work. Oh, there's no sound because it's muted. But the problem is that I have this little zoom button that I'm not able to move out of the way. And so I'm not able to unmute. Just 1 second. Okay, let's see if I just 1 second. Okay, let's see if this works.
Vyasadeva is very kind. People Kali Yuga are so bad. Vyasadeva is feeling sad because Kali Yuga is so bad. He can see the foresee suffering because the sage is declining. Split the Vedas into 4, Rig, Sama, Atharva, and Yajur. But he was feeling incomplete, though accomplishing a much major feat. He felt that he had done some wrong, but then Narada came along.
Okay, and then just a second group of kids doing.
He split the Vedas into 4. He's feeling incomplete. Accomplishing a major feat. He felt he done something wrong, but then Narada came along.
Okay,
2, 3, go.
pretty noisy. All right. And then also other analogy activities in the chapter that help understand the analogies that are given in the chapter. So just like an astrologer can see the future fate of a man, or an astronomer can foretell the solar and lunar eclipses, liberated souls can see the future of all mankind. And then the activities given in the chapter really help understand this analogy. There's a nice one about prophecies. I actually did not do this one in my class, so I do choose, which activities we do. Guess the scripture quiz. So at the end of the chapter, there are a few resources. One is this one, where different scriptures and then a few salient points about them are listed. And based on that, using those clues, the children themselves organize a quiz, a scripture quiz among themselves. So one team asked the other team, and this was really nice. How is Vyasadeva thinking and feeling? So often, children that are young enjoy comic strips, and they enjoy these little thought bubbles and speech bubbles. And so I found this activity to be very, very useful. The resources given at the end, and I included a picture from my son's workbook where he's actually filled in, and some things are his thoughts and some things are his words, to show how he's thinking and feeling. Really helps the child understand the concept of what's going on for Vyasadeva. Punctuation practice, I like this one, helps punctuation, grammar, and writing, teaching directly from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Keyword scramble is always fun for children. Here's a solved one from my son's workbook. And keywords, so understanding and increasing your vocabulary by understanding the words that are listed. And sorry for the noise. It's my son's birthday in a day, and he has friends over for a sleepover. And then also a nice word search in the chapter where the words are given at the bottom, and the children can find the words in the word search. Here are children working on activities from chapter 4, and also, of course, answers are given at the end. So again, we've been having a lot of questions. Order via Amazon in the US as well as the UK. And for India, our Golden Age media is really chugging along and trying to keep up with all the orders and the questions. But those books are being mailed or are going to be mailed very soon. So that is my sharing, and want to open it up now for questions. So we see that we already have some nice comments and questions on YouTube as well as Zoom. So a lot of people really appreciated Sapna Mataji's children's artwork and found it very adorable. Here's one question from Sulochana Mataji. Hare Krishna Mataji. Did Vyasadeva divide the Vedas into 4 parts after he was meditating about the symptoms of Kali Yuga? Oh, can't hear you, Mataji, you're muted. Okay, let's see if I can help with that, unmuting you. Okay, you should be able to unmute now, sorry.
Okay, there you go. So yes, Vyasadeva divided the Vedas after he meditated on the, on what's going to come. Yes. When he saw the different disturbances in Kali Yuga that people are going to be facing, then he took compassion on the suffering souls of this Yuga, and he divided the Vedas into 4, just so they can, so that it becomes more digestible. One Veda was very vast and big, and so to facilitate everyone, he divided the Vedas into 4. He also wrote many scriptures besides that, so I mentioned that. In particular, the Mahabharata, in which the Bhagavad Gita was given. Now, Bhagavad Gita, one would think that Bhagavad Gita would have satisfied him. However, Srimad Bhagavatam, still he felt the necessity of writing Srimad Bhagavatam because of a complete absorption in Krishna, which is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is more in the form of philosophy, whereas Bhagavatam is in the form of stories, which is more relishable for people in Kali Yuga, in the form of stories.
Okay. I can take this question from the guide for young readers. There's a question from Achintya Priya Mataji. She says, regarding the scripture quiz, probably most of the books are unknown to the children. So I should mention that there are multiple ways of using the resources that are given in the book. And because I've taught this to different audiences at different points of time, I remember one time I had a group of children that were being trained in Krishna consciousness and were quite familiar with actually most of the books that are listed. And so at that time, yes, it was as simple as having one team give clues to the other team, and they were able to guess. But there was also another time when, it was a mixed crowd where there are children that are from families that are practicing, and then their newer children to Sunday school. So the way I did this activity, Guess the Scripture Quiz, was to actually use it to make mind maps first. So we studied the 8 scriptures that are listed, and we took each, like, you know, the clues that are given for Bhagavad Gita, and we, on a sheet of paper, put Bhagavad Gita in the middle, and then I learned that from this book as well, because chapter 1 talks about making mind maps for the very first verse. And so we put Bhagavad Gita in the middle, and then we put arrows and a bubble, and it says, Krishna shows his universal form in it. It was spoken on the battlefield, 18 chapters, Krishna to Arjuna, in the Mahabharata, you know, so we made a little visual out of these clues. So that gave us, you know, 20, 25, 30 minutes of studying these scriptures from the guidebook. And, you know, then when the children had enough of a picture in their mind, then we moved to the quiz part. So, you know, there are multiple ways of handling it depending on the kind of audience you have. It's a very good question about the familiarity level. And I think some of the activities just require a little bit of creativity in modifying to perhaps a newer audience. Okay, we have some nice sharing here from Prema Ras Prabhu and Ratikeli Radhika Mataji. Thank you for these classes and beautiful slides, Aruddha Mataji. Thank you, Shri Radhika Mataji, for the very practical teaching tips. I have some questions. Kindly shed some light on these topics. 1. Sukadeva was Radharani's parrot in his previous life. Why did he become an impersonalist at the beginning in this life as Vyasa's son?
Well, there are 2 types of impersonalists. One is the Brahmavadis, and the second one is Mayavadis. So Brahmavadis are not considered offenders to Krishna, and Sukadeva Goswami was not an offender. He had realized Brahman, and he had realized, you know, in every way. So I think it was more like he had to play a role. You know, he had to play a role. So Krishna had chosen him, you know, to play a role in this material world, to come here and be the son of Vyasadeva, and to be born in a very unique way. You know, there's a story of how he was born that I related earlier. So sometimes Krishna puts his devotees in positions where you know, it may be in a situation where it doesn't coincide with who they eternally, in the eternal form, are, and for the purpose of teaching us, and for the purpose of you know, inspiring us. So
and he asks, is this a pastime to show how even Atmarams are attracted to Bhagavatam?
Yes, definitely. And another example would be the 4 Kumaras. You know, they were Atma Ramas, but they were attracted to the personal form of the Lord as soon as they saw the Lord and smelt his tulsi. So again, another example of an Atma Ram like Sukadeva Goswami. Yes.
Also from Prabhu and Mataji, how do we practically understand Sukadeva remaining in the womb for 16 years? Did he grow in size after his birth?
Well, these are stories that are completely in a different dimension, you know. Like, for example, it's said in the higher planetary systems, there's no pangs of birth. So in other words, the pangs of birth we see in this material world, where a mother gets pregnant for 9 months, and that itself is quite troublesome. And then, of course, the pangs when the child is actually born, and later on as well. So all that is generally skipped in the planet of demigods. So what to speak of somebody taking birth like Sukadeva Goswami. And we see that repeatedly in Srimad Bhagavatam, like, you know, in the story of Kardamuni and Devahuti, they had 3 daughters, and all of them immediately as they were born, they immediately attained youth, and they were quickly married to, 9 daughters, and they were quickly married to the 9 sages. So so these devotees, they, just like Krishna, you know, for Brahma to be born, he didn't have to go through the routine of of pregnating. Pardon? Is the problem hearing, Radhika?
No.
Okay. So in this way, these pure devotees also, and transcendental personalities also do not have to go through the usual route of like ordinary people. So there's many stories like that in Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, they say how in the higher planetary systems, there's planets of serpents and birds, and all this sounds like a fairy tale, but actually, they're true, because we have to see it from another dimension. We don't just have that vision that we can actually understand these things. However, we read and we give the faith to our children that actually this is something that is actually is available to be seen once one becomes purified, So.
Okay. We have a question from Ankur Prabhu. Hare Krishna Mataji. What is your opinion on bilingual approach? My daughter, 6 year, and her 2 cousins of same age are the participants. Going in English, it becomes very slow to read and they lose interest. Meanwhile, I tried in Hindi so they can quickly read in Hindi. Rather, what we're doing is that I read first and then repeat by listening. Hindi, we do faster. About half chapter we can cover in an hour if we read in Hindi. 10 verses if we read in English. So I try to supplement with an overview in English and some reading in English so that they're equally aligned. Kindly guide.
Yes. So if I understand correctly, you are just simply, you're giving an overview rather than going through verse after verse of actually reading the translations. So I don't know how old your children are and whether reading, they're 16? You said?
6 years. So he has 3 children that are reading together that are all 6.
Oh, yes. So at 6 years old, reading is a great effort. And so it's okay to paraphrase and to give the overview at that age, because the children are struggling with reading. And the language level in Srimad Bhagavatam is very, very elevated. So yes, you can do that. However, you should encourage your children to start, becoming fluent in reading, in the language, in the English language, and be able to actually read the text directly from Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. That would be very, very beneficial. So as you work towards that goal, it's okay to paraphrase and to give them the story, give them the overview of the story. Mm-hmm.
And that has brought us to an end of the list of questions we have right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay. This is very nice. We can... this was actually a very short chapter, It was a small chapter compared to the last one, which was, chapter 3, the incarnations of the Lord. So it's a very fun chapter actually for children, because there's so many stories that can be given from this story. So many stories, right? The story of Sukadeva Goswami and Vyasadeva following him, and the story of, him, having the transcendental vision. A lot of creative, like Radhika said, a lot of creative things can be applied, can be used in this to enhance their imagination and, and help them to become very, very creative. So.
I forgot to mention, with the guest descriptor activity, the question that came up, another creative approach is, so what I did is I made a copy of that page, guest descriptor page, because it has line by line clues listed. And then when I made a copy, then I cut them up, so like Bhagavad Gita has 5 clues and Srimad Bhagavatam has 5 clues, but I've cut everything up into smaller chits and then I've spread them out throughout the floor. And now they have to find, for each scripture, they have to find the right slip. And so when they pick up a slip and it says, was spoken on the battlefield. Now they're, okay, which scripture was that? Oh, it was Bhagavad Gita. So then they club it, or they combine it with the Bhagavad Gita, section. I had like eight stations set up. So each station has a scripture. And then the children, all of them together, need to go around and pick up each clue from the floor and read, was written by Rupa Goswami, and which scripture is that? Oh, it belongs to that scripture. So then, that's another way to do that activity after you've studied the scriptures. Shama Rupini Mataji, I'm going to invite you to ask your question by unmuting yourself.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Mataji. I had a question, if we are doing this in a group of 4 people, and we meet only once, and it's such that, the kids, they don't want to sit more than 30 to 40 minutes. So it means that, the kids are still reading the chapter and we don't still get to the activity part. So would it affect the continuity, or, is that okay? We just do for multiple weeks, the same chapter, or, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's okay to stretch it out for 2 or 3 weeks. If that's the case, if your time is short. Generally, because it's not possible to do the discussion, to read from Srila Prabhupada's translation as well as cover the guidebook in one session. It's not possible. So generally, the reading and discussion may take 2 times, depending on the age of the child. But I generally am able to do it in 1 hour, the reading and the discussion, because I do these online classes, and I generally take 1 hour and I cover the Prabhupada's chapter, the chapter from Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. And then the next week can be devoted to doing the activities, and you can see how long that takes, because if it's only 40 minutes, you may need 2 sessions for the activities, if you want to cover a lot of activities, or you can pick and choose, which ones. With an online situation, I'm able to do sometimes I'm able to do some activities like understanding the story. I will read out to them the question, and then I'll give them the multiple choices, and then it becomes really fun. And then I give each child an opportunity to give one answer like that. And then I'll go to the higher thinking questions and pick out some questions from the guidebook on the higher thinking. And I will ask different children, make sure that every one of them get a turn to answer a question, and like that. And then I'll even take other activities, and all this is done orally online. Then I'm able to do also other activities like analogy. Sometimes you can do an analogy activity online, by kind of adjusting, like Radhika said, adjusting a little bit, because it may require some charts and things which we are not there personally with them. But there are some activities that we can do it online. So I'm able to cover quite a few activities like that, If you cannot be with them physically, you can be with them. You can still do some activities from the guidebook orally, and it's always fun. Did I answer your question, Shamrupini? I can't hear you. Oh.
Mataji, yes. No, the only thing is, some of the kids, they are very new to this, so they don't know much. So it is taking a lot of time, for them even to read Bhagavatam little bit, so that is taking a lot of time, because we have just begun after attending your sessions. We have started this. So it's very relatively new. So I did almost 2 sessions, but it's taking a lot of time. Yeah. So that's what I was asking. So is it okay to stretch it, because I really want to do the activities so that they have the understanding and they can,
okay. Sometimes, especially in the earlier cantos, like Canto 1 and 2. Canto 1 has a lot of stories that's coming up. But sometimes the chapters are very philosophical, and the verses are very big, and it's hard for the children. So you could, what I did one time was I had them read half the chapter, and then I covered half by reading the summary of the chapter from the guidebook. You know,
Okay.
so in
Yeah.
this way, I just recently did that, and it really worked. This was in Canto 4. The Kumaras actually, talking to Prithu Maharaj. They came flying down. Beautiful it was, but the instructions they gave were very, very philosophical, and they're long. It's a long chapter, right? So I covered half of it like that, had them read, but then I skipped the half and read the summary for it. Especially I'm talking about because these are Zoom classes, these are online classes, and it's really hard to motivate them, it's harder to motivate them, right? So you can try tricks like that. And then I read only from that part that needed to be read, and then we opened it for discussion, of different, deep points from that chapter,
Okay, yeah, Mataji, that helps. Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Our next question is going to be from Achintya Priya Mataji. I'm just going to unmute her. So nice to see you, Achintya Priya Mataji. She's been religiously attending webinars through the summer, has beautiful, very energetic children, and always a beautiful altar behind her. She lives in Assam. Go ahead.
Yes, Mataji. I wanted to say that I'm English speaking and I live in India, Assam. And our temple president for a long time, he would like me to take up some classes for children like Sunday school. And but most of them probably could not read a level of English of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as I understood, many would not be able also to invest in the guidebooks. So what would you suggest in this situation?
Well, you can read the story to them from the guidebook because they are written in a story form. But if you've read the chapter directly from Prabhupada's books, the translations and puppets, then even though you're reading the story from the guidebook, which is very, very done in a, which has been condensed, but because you've had a good knowledge by reading Prabhupada's chapter, you will be able to make it very more meaningful and deep, because you can bring that chapter to them in more ways than what the summary would provide, bringing in more points, So what I'm saying is that, and because of your understanding will be deeper, you will be able to actually really churn that, that matter from that book, from Prabhupada's book, and give it to the children. So the summary from the guidebook becomes very, very crucial because it helps the parent or teacher to actually, give it to them in an interesting form, but the teacher and parent can actually add to it,
Yes.
So you don't need to have them read if that's such a struggle for right now, Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And regarding what you said, Achintya Priya Mataji, about, you understand most people probably wouldn't be able to afford a guidebook. Just use the activities from there, so you as the teacher have your master book and take those activities, make photocopies, and then there's just so much craft and, activities that involve sensory perception and jumping and singing, and that if it's not possible, then it's perfectly fine for just the teacher to just use her book, although always preferable, if it's possible for the parents to buy their own books. It's just, having this workbook for the child is just very, very, it's a really nice tool in their hands to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you, Achintya Priya Mataji. Sita Rupa Mataji asked, how to start teaching Srimad Bhagavatam to a 4.5-year-old child?
Well, again, the same process. You give it to them because they cannot read, they cannot sit through Prabhupada's book. So we give it to them in a story form, in an exciting form. Well, what I've tried also is that I read the translations to them directly from Prabhupada's books also, and but not, I mean, especially those that are in the form of stories, like then it can be read directly to them, and then you can ask questions while you're reading the translations to them, especially for interesting stories. However, in this for the first canto that we are seeing for these chapters, I would just simply give it to them, paraphrase and give it to them. Mm-hmm.
And something that Aruddha Mataji always trained me on when my children were younger was the pictures of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's our resource, and the children, she told me they'll never tire, they'll never, and they didn't, they never tired with like the same pictures over and over again for the 12 cantos. And, so just showing them the pictures and narrating the story to them orally, that was a great tip that Mataji had provided to me when my children were younger. Question from Premaras Prabhu and Ratikeli Radhika Mataji. What is the ideal way to use the chapter summary provided in the guidebook? Do we read the translations together and then the summary from the guidebook before working on the activities?
Yes. We read the translations from Prabhupada's books, and then we read the summary and then the activities. Radhika, do you want to add anything to that?
And, depending on how old your children are, perhaps the story summary from the guidebook can be made animated, and even because it's very much in the form of a dialogue. And so I often do it like a drama. So we do the story summary like a drama in our home. Question from Satya Mataji. I wanted to ask, please, Mother Aruddha, you already touched the topic about different gender, as a soul has no gender. When or which age of a child should we start to discuss more about sexual differences?
Well, we don't separately discuss that, but as they come along, issues of this nature come in the Bhagavatam, we deal with it in context of the story. Then it becomes a lot easier, and it becomes better, more, we are able to convey that in a more effective way. So issues of, in terms of, you may be referring to adult topics, in the Bhagavatam, where there's mention of this attraction between man and woman. Topics like these are plenty in Bhagavatam, but it's always put in context of, in other words, attraction which is mundane, which is meant for satisfaction of the body, is always detrimental, and that comes very, very clearly through the stories. But the same attraction, if it's done for the pleasure of Krishna, to have God conscious children, then that same attraction can be a source of advancement. So in this way, we, without providing the details of sex life or the differences, that's really not necessary. That's something that children, they learn over time anyway. But rather to we focus more on the stories and the messages that come through in the stories. That will naturally become very clear, the differences between man and woman, their roles in society, as well as their attraction to each other, and how to use that attraction in service to Krishna. So I went through the entire Bhagavatam with my children, and now with other children, and I've always found it very useful for them, and not only now, but later on in life as they get older and they leave home and are on their own.
So Satyamataji continues her question, because it's coming in through YouTube, so it comes in parts. So these topics, do we really discuss them, or we just explain the way Srila Prabhupada explains them in the Srimad Bhagavatam?
We just explain the way Srila Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavatam without getting into details. Children automatically understand, they naturally understand that the details of sex life is not to be discussed, it's something that is meant for later on, but not at this point. I mean, children are not really looking for those answers, because they are quite innocent, especially our devotee children are quite innocent in that area, in that respect. So we don't need to necessarily get into those topics.
Yeah, and I wanted to encourage in Mataji's book, Homeschooling Krishna's Children, she does talk about discussing adult topics from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and she always she speaks of just very matter-of-factly, discussing such things with children. This past week, I've been discussing with the group of 4 boys that I teach, Kardama Muni and Devahuti, and and Kashyapa and Diti before that, and the one higher thinking question that was in Mataji's book in the 3rd canto was that normally material enjoyment is kind of denigrated, right, in spiritual life, but how come Kardama Muni's enjoyment is being glorified, and he is so glorious that he's even better than the demigods. The demigods can't even travel the way that he is completely unrestricted to travel. And because these children have been trained in the system from the beginning, Srimad Bhagavatam, they were able to answer it and say, well, it's not that material enjoyment is denigrated, but what is the purpose of the activity, and what is the consciousness with which it is being performed? And Kardama Muni is completely in Krishna consciousness. He's trying to have progeny in Krishna consciousness, and therefore, he's glorified even more than the demigods. So, it's nice that we're able to understand deep philosophy like this, and even adult topics from the perspective of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes, Bhanti.
No, I was just saying that these topics, the children are going to pick up anyway. They can't avoid it. So it's better that they pick it up from Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam will give them the right perspective, how to approach these topics concerning sex and violence and things like that. So just by being in this world, they're going to pick it up. So better we do it and not hesitate to, do these topics. Like I said, but we have boundaries, as to what we're going to discuss with them. The boundaries are set.
Satya Mataji asked another question. Can we always recite Sanskrit verses or just sometimes?
Well, if you find that it's very, the children that you're teaching are very, very good and quick about that, it's okay. I found for myself, them, when we do all the Sanskrit verses, then we get delayed in our discussion and the flow may not be as much, So I've only read the first one, and sometimes the very popular ones that Prabhupada really likes, we would also recite that. So that's my take on that.
We have a question that is still being typed in YouTube by Parikshit Maharaj Prabhu. So I'm sorry, the question is not completely here. And besides that, we've run out of other questions. So perhaps if we can give a couple minutes for his question to come through. Okay, I don't see it still. Perhaps, oh, there it is. Okay, this is from Paresh Kumar Rana Prabhu. He says he has a 7-year-old daughter, and he has started reading Srimad Bhagavatam verses daily. He discusses 2 verses with her every day. Is there any teaching group or the Mataji has that she can join so she can interact more with kids and discuss.
It depends on where you're at. I mean, if you're living in America, possibly one group, but for outsiders outside of America, it's very hard because of the time difference. It's harder. So maybe, so he can get in touch with me, Radhika, and I can try, see.
And feel free to write to va.iskon@gmail.com, our Vaishnava Academy email, and we can get you in touch with Mataji. But also, this is something that we've emphasized previously, because we do get these questions during these meetings often, that Mataji's purpose in doing these sessions is to empower parents and teachers to take the model and move with it, and feel empowered and inspired, and have the resources and tools you need as parents to discuss with your own children, because her capacity is limited, and also the time differences add. So hopefully you feel inspired, Prabhu, to take the book and run with it, although he says he does live in Parsippany, New Jersey. Okay, we're coming to the close of our session, Mataji. Any closing comments?
Thank you very much, all of you, for regularly coming to attend these sessions. Feel very, very grateful and happy to be here. And next week, we'll cover chapter 5 of the first canto. We are moving along. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.